Welcome to the College Park Church of Christ Sermon Series podcast. This sermon was recorded at the College Park Church of Christ in the Conroe Porter area. Join us for worship on Sundays at 10:30 a.m. and Wednesday at 7 p.m. Thanks for studying the Word of God with us.
Raising faithful stewards, things that I want my children to learn about money. As we begin, Psalm 127, verse 3 and 4 says, "Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord. The fruit of the womb is a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior, so are the children of one's youth." And the reality is, if you are here today and you have children in your home that you are raising, God has made you stewards of them, essentially, to raise them the right way. They are a heritage, a gift, a blessing from God. And you, as their parent, have been given the responsibility to shoot them as an arrow out of your hand in the right direction towards the right target. That's going to encompass a lot of things as parents that we seek to train and teach our children in. And one of those things should be how to be good, faithful stewards for the Lord. There's another passage in Proverbs chapter 22, verse 6 that says, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." The reality is, our kids learn primarily from us as parents. And our habits in all areas of life, intentionally or unintentionally, are passed on to our children. Now, you may be here and you may not have children in your home this morning. These principles are still going to apply to you personally. They may also apply to you if you have grandkids, and there's still principles and things that you can teach the younger generation or those families that are here in the church as well that may need some mentorship and some guidance and some help. So I want all of us that are here this morning to think about how are we using the things that God has blessed us with to train the next generation of people to be good, faithful stewards over those things. And so specifically today, we're going to look at 6 things about money that the scriptures talk about that not only do we need to implement in our lives, but we need to be teaching our children to do the same. So things I want my children to learn about money. Number 1, that they are managers and not owners. You know, the scripture is very clear about the fact that God owns and controls everything, that we only have a life and breath and the ability to exist through Him, much less all of the talents and abilities that He has given us as well. All things ultimately come from Him and belong to Him. Deuteronomy 10 verse 14 says, "Indeed, heaven and the highest heavens belong to the Lord your God, and also the earth with all that is in it." Everything that exists is God's. And yet we get into our minds sometimes and unintentionally pass on to our kids the American mindset of earning income and gaining assets and those things being ours. And we're very protective of those things being ours when instead they're really not ours, they're really God's. And I want my children to learn that everything that they have comes from God and is a blessing from Him. In Luke chapter 16, 10 and 11, Jesus said this, "He who is faithful in what is least is faithful also in much. And he who is unjust in what is least is unjust also in much. Therefore, if you have not been faithful in the unrighteous mammon, who will commit to your trust in the true riches?" And this comes after Jesus talks about this, the failing steward, essentially, in this story of this steward that was not a good steward, and then he made some shrewd moves and was commended on his shrewdness, but essentially he was being reprimanded for not being a good steward. And Jesus makes this statement, and there's a couple of things I want to draw out. First, those who are faithful in the least or in the little things will be faithful in more things. As our kids are growing, what they have, what is theirs, what they own, what they have access to is very small. It's a small amount of money, a small amount of possessions, whatever those things are, and they must be trained and learned how to manage those small things while they are young so that as they do transition into adulthood and they become adults, they will have much more money and assets and things to manage, and they need to know how to do those things wisely. And then Jesus makes this statement in verse 11, "If you have not been faithful in the unrighteous mammon, who will commit to your trust the true riches. And his point here, mammon is money, and he's not saying that money in and of itself is unrighteous. It's more of there is no righteousness or unrighteousness there. It's just money. And he's going, if you're not even going to be faithful in the physical, temporal things like money, how are you going to be faithful with the spiritual things, the spiritual blessings of salvation that God will give us? And so we have to, in essence, form habits that even with things as physical as money that we deal with day in and day out, it shows our commitment to God. It shows how committed we are to being faithful in what he has given us. And if we are faithful in even the little things or the physical things, the tangible things of this world, we will be blessed by God, not only with more of that potentially, but with the more important spiritual things as well. And if we are good stewards of the finances that God gives us, we too will be good stewards of the gospel that we have been given. And see the importance of managing that and sharing that with others with the generosity of spirit that we develop. And so as I think about teaching my children this principle that they are managers, not owners, there's a few things that come to mind as far as some practical strategies. One of those is to teach them to pray with thanksgiving, to be grateful for everything that they have, and that I need to model that first, that as a father, I need to show that I am praying to God prayers of thanksgiving and gratefulness for the home that I have to live in, the car that I have to drive, the money that we're able to earn, the food that we have on the table, and so on and so forth. All of the wonderful blessings that we have come from him, and I need to show that to my children, that they too need to be able to pray and thank God for those things that they have. So I would encourage parents to encourage your children and teach your children how to pray a prayer of thanksgiving and gratefulness for the things that they have and that they own, for truly all of those things come from God. I also think about teaching my children, and we've tried, as we've been raising our kids, to do this, to teach them to be careful and intentional with the things that they own. You know, it's important that we are that way. God has given us the resources, as we've mentioned. We need to take care of those things. Well, our kids need to learn from an early age that they don't need to tear things up. They don't need to tear the house up. The house is a blessing that we have. They need to respect the fact that God has blessed us with that and not tear it up. And we need to teach them those principles. Their own toys, their own possessions, all of those things when they're little, we try to teach them to be respectful of your possessions and other people's possessions. And we're not going to treat things the wrong way. We're not going to tear stuff up. We're not going to be irresponsible managers with the things that we have. And those habits, if we can teach that early, will transition into adulthood to remember that everything that we have comes from God, and we need to treat it with respect and with honor. And then finally, to value our time, our talents, and treasures, and use them all to glorify God. I need to model as a father to my kids that if God owns everything and all of it is truly his, that's not just the physical or financial resources. That's also my talents and my abilities and my time and my effort and all of those things, that I need to show that God is the priority in that, and that all of me belongs to him, and that I need to glorify and honor him with my whole being, with my whole self. And we've got to be intentional about training our kids to be that way as well. And if we'll do that early, to show them the importance of remembering they're managers of their life, they're managers of their talents, they're managers of their time, they're managers of their money, not owners, it will go a long way toward creating good, faithful stewards when they're adults. Number 2, things I want my children to learn about money, that money doesn't grow on trees. You've heard that phrase. Money is not an unlimited resource, and money comes from hard work ultimately. Proverbs chapter 10 and verse 4 says, "He who has a slack hand becomes poor, but the hand of the diligent makes rich." I want my children to understand the importance of hard work and the fact that money doesn't grow on trees. In fact, it comes as the direct result of going out and being diligent and working hard. And that if they want to have more blessings and more resources to manage properly for the Lord, they must be willing to go put in the effort and put in the work. 1 Timothy 5 verse 8 talks about if anyone does not provide for his own, and especially for those of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. You know, this concept is something that as a father, I try to live out in my own life and with my own family each and every day. I've also got 2 boys. I've got 2 girls as well that need to be able to provide for themselves also. But specifically thinking about training boys to be men, to be fathers and husbands and leaders of families, this is what they need to be able to do with passion for God. To go say, I'm going to go earn and I'm going to create income and use my passions and my ability and my time that God has given me to go create value for my family, to provide those things that my family needs. Good, faithful managers of resources make sure that they are providing for themselves and for their own family. They're not lazy. They're hard workers. And that's what I want my children to be. So as I think about practical strategies to teach them those things, first of all, I want to instill within my children a work ethic that doesn't quit. At the job, at home, at church, with projects. And I have the primary responsibility of modeling those things. That they see me working hard. They see their mom working hard. They see us putting dedicated, intentional effort into church, into projects, into ministries, into the things that we're involved in that we're trying to honor and glorify God with. And that they see that life is not about couch potatoing. You know, it's good to have rest. God rested on the 7th day. We need some rest here and there. We need some breaks here and there. I'm looking forward to this evening to get a little bit of rest from the weekend. I'm going to be able to go relax a little bit, I think, which is going to be great. A little bit of rest is good. But tomorrow, you know what we're going to be doing? We're going to be back to work. Rest and laziness and not having a good work ethic is not something that we're going to do in life because that's not what God has called us to do or to be. And I want my children to understand that as well. I want them to know how to make wise decisions related to their education and career. And I want to help them to find those things that they're passionate about, that they enjoy doing, but that also are going to be practical and be able to make a good living for themselves as adults. And parents, we have the responsibility of helping our children to be guided in those good directions, to train up a child in the way they should go so that when they're old, they'll not depart from it. That's part of our responsibility, is to help them to make those decisions. And so early on, I want to teach them to work hard and look for ways in which they can use their talents and abilities to earn. And so you may think about ideas when you have kids of a lemonade stand or other things like that, where they can learn the value of doing something that creates some income, putting some work into it and creating income. If you have an allowance that you give your children, you know, we have had a chore-based amount of money that we provide for our children that is based upon the work that they put in. And if they don't put in that work, then they don't earn. And we wanted to be intentional about them seeing the value of work and seeing results from that work, not simply handing them money and saying, here. And that's the decision that we've made because I believe that it teaches them that principle. And so when they begin to make those connections about when I work, I get paid, then they start thinking about what other work can I do? Is there other things that I can go do to make more and earn more? And that's a way to teach a good work ethic and the results of putting in that hard work. I want to teach them that God blesses diligence and that results come with effort. That ultimately everything that we do as far as work and our career and our education and all of those decisions that we make, that it all boils down to wanting to honor and glorify the God that created us. And if we're doing that and we're waking up each and every day and we're honoring and glorifying God through doing something that we enjoy doing, putting in a good, hard day's work and accomplishing tasks and providing for our family as a result, that is exactly what we should want. We are living the dream in that case. Because the dream is not to be lazy and have nothing to go do. The dream is to go work hard and accomplish things and fulfill the purpose that God has put inside us. And that's what I want my kids to understand. Money doesn't grow on trees. It comes as a result of intentional effort. Number 3, things I want my children to learn about money, that money is a good servant but a bad master. I want them to understand that they need to be in control of their money and not the other way around. Proverbs chapter 21 and verse 5 says, "The plans of the diligent surely lead to plenty, but those of everyone who is hasty surely to poverty." And notice he says not just diligence itself, but the plans of the diligent. those diligent-minded people with a good work ethic who say, I'm going to sit down and make a plan for what we're going to do for income. I'm going to make a plan for where we're going to spend our money. I'm going to make a plan for how we're managing these resources. The plans of the diligent lead surely to plenty. But when we're hasty, when we make decisions that are unplanned, when we're not intentional about what we're doing, we come to poverty. That's the scriptural principle that's being taught. Jesus said in Luke 14 and verse 28, "For which of you intending to build a tower does not sit down first and count the cost, whether he has enough to finish it?" And Jesus looked at this man as a foolish man who would begin this great construction project without first sitting down and saying, do I have enough money to cover the materials needed to get this done? And so at the end of the story, had this man actually done this, he would have ended up with a partially finished tower that wasn't worth anything. He would have had no resources because he spent it all on trying to build this tower that he couldn't finish. And at the end of the day, he's going to suffer public shame and embarrassment and mocking from people because he spent everything he had and didn't even get a tower out of it. And it's because he didn't sit down and count the cost and plan. And I want my children to understand that they have to be intentional with their money and control their money and not be controlled by covetousness and greed and the other things that are caused by a love of money that the scripture warns against. So as I think about practical strategies related to that I need to model, I need to show my kids how to budget and plan for expenses and for spending. And when they're young, that started off looking like this, of teaching them that when they earned, either from their chores or through doing odd jobs or a lemonade stand or whatever that was, they get money or even birthday money that comes in. When we have money that we receive, what do we do with that money? We have to make a plan. We have to be intentional. And when they're young, I think this is a great way to do it, to show them that there's three in general things that you do with money. One of those things is, yes, you're going to spend some of it for those things to enjoy, but you also want to save some of it. You also want to give some of it. And so we be very intentional. We bring that money in and we say, how much do I want to put towards giving? And let's do that first. And then how much do I want to save? Let's do that second. And whatever we have left after giving and saving, well, we're going to spend that. And we can enjoy it. And we can have fun with that money and go to the store and pick out a toy or whatever the case may be. And when they're young, that tends to work great. And then as they get older, you begin to teach them the more detailed versions of that, of how to break down a budget and actually begin to plan for expenses. When they get a little bit older, we're not quite to that point yet, but there's going to be a time when there's part-time job opportunities and real money's going to start flowing in to their lives, and real decisions have to begin to be made. And I want them to have habits instilled within them so that when they enter into the actual workforce, they're not just going to take that money in and go, and there it goes, and it's just going to fly right back out. But that they are going to control the money and not the other way around. I want to teach them to live in reality. I want to teach my kids how to say no to themselves. And if I want to teach them how to say no to themselves, I also need to model how to say no to myself. And show them that when we want something, we budget for it, we plan for it, we save for it. We're not just going to run out and spend money that we don't have. We're not just going to have something because it's what in our heart we decided at that moment we wanted. Delayed gratification is a good thing. It's a good principle for our children to learn. They don't have to have everything right then. And one of the things that we try to implement, and it's not on the screen, but that I would recommend is the waiting rule. And I mentioned it over the weekend, even with us personally as adults, that we can do that. But the waiting rule, and even when they're a kid, if they have some toy they see and they want to go, all right, well, let's wait. Some people would recommend a day at least, but maybe even a week. Let's say, let's wait a week, and then let's see. Do you still want to spend your money on that? Let's see if you still want that a week later. And there's so many things with little kids, especially, they will see something and decide they want it, and 30 minutes later they see something else and they decide they'd rather have that. And it's a lot of energy going towards the things that they want because that's built into them as children. And we as parents have to be able to help them to rein that in and go, okay, I want this. Now, how do I make actual decisions about buying it? Is it something I truly need to spend resources on? I'm not going to spend that which I've decided to give. I'm not going to spend that which I've decided to save. But of this, how am I going to make those decisions about what to spend? And we have to help our kids do that. So I like to encourage that, the waiting rule, wait a day, wait a week, whatever the case may be, and say, let's think about that. Let's look at how much your money you have. Let's be intentional about it, and let's see if you really still want that after some time. Be willing to tell them no, but also be willing to tell yourself no. That's very important. And number 3, impulse or unplanned decisions have negative consequences. I want them to see that. And so sometimes there may be even a strategic time where you need to allow them to make a decision like that when you know that there was something they were trying to save for, you know there was something else that they really wanted, and maybe we allow them to make an impulse decision once to then show them, oh, well, yeah, you did want that, but remember, then last week at the store, you decided on a whim to buy this, and now you don't have the money for that. And that's real life consequences that will teach them the importance of not making decisions on a whim. And as adults, I want to encourage us to not make financial decisions on a whim. Be intentional, be planned. I want my kids to know that. Money, if it is controlling us, if we are being pulled by those passions and desires, by covetousness, by greed, by a love of money, by any of those principles, if we feel the pull of something that we want and we can't resist or say no, there's a problem. We've got to be willing to say no, and we've got to teach our kids to do the same. Number 4, things I want my children to learn about money. When you borrow money, you're robbing your future self. When we spend money we don't have to get something on credit, we are basically robbing our future time, our future earnings, our future money. And I want them to understand that principle. Proverbs 22, verse 7 says, "The rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender." When we decide to borrow, when we decide to buy something or gain something that we don't have the money to get, and so we put that on credit, what we have become is a servant to that lender. Now, when we go to work the next day, we're not really going to work for our own provision or for what our family needs. We're going to work to pay that person or that company that we already took something from that we didn't have money for. And so now we're having to dedicate future work and future earnings to these other people that we can't then put towards the good of our family. Hebrews 13 and verse 5 says, "Let your conduct be without covetousness. Be content with such things as you have. For he himself has said, I will never leave you nor forsake you." This passage ties 2 principles together, opposite concepts, covetousness and contentment. Be without covetousness, be content. It's the opposite. If we're covetous, it means in our heart we have a heart of discontentment. We don't see what God has blessed us with as enough. And we're trying to fill some hole with all of those other things, with money, with possessions. And if that's where our heart is, we need to look at, in the mirror, look at ourselves and say, how can I cultivate a heart of contentment? Paul talked about being content, whether he was abounding or abased, whether he had a lot or he had a little. That really it wasn't even the financial decision that defined that, it was the state of the heart. And I want my kids to understand that the state of their heart needs to be one that says, what God has given me, what I have, is enough, whether it's a lot or it's a little. And beyond that, if my resources grow, then I'll manage that well, and I'll keep working hard and all of those things. But whether I have a lot or a little, it's enough, and I'm content with those things. And I'm not going to be covetous, looking at other people or other things and saying that's something that I have to have, because we're taking away the power of decisions for our future self. So as I think about practical strategies related to that, I think about contentment, whether or not we have a lot or little, as I mentioned, and the danger of coveting what others have. I think about my kids that have come to me and they go, well, so-and-so just got, and it's a comparison game. And that's the world that we live in today, is their friends got something, so then they automatically think that they must have that thing. And for adults, it's no different. We look on social media all the time and we see the highlights of people's lives, and we see people showing off the new cars and the big houses and all the wonderful things that they have. And sometimes, admit it, even for us as adults, we look at that and we go, man, that'd be nice, wouldn't it? Would love to be able to live there, would love to have that. And what that is it's feeding that heart of covetousness and not contentment. And so instead of running to the store to go buy the thing that your kid said, hey, so-and-so has this, I must have it, and you go, oh, okay, well, let's go get it for you. Instead of doing that, we be intentional as parents and say, it really doesn't matter. It's wonderful that Johnny has that, but we don't have that. And we need to look at our money and make sure that that's something that we want. And so we're going to implement the weight rule and all those things we've already talked about. And we're going to teach them to be intentional with spending and not to covet what other people have. I think about the importance of paying back what we, that should say owe, not how, what we owe and how to effectively get out of debt. This is something that's maybe a little bit difficult to teach a young kid because they're not going to have actual debt. But we can model that, number one, through our effective management of debt. And if we are in debt as parents, as we mentioned over the weekend, it can be one of the most powerful things in the world to show our children on being intentional to get out of debt and to get past to those, to break those chains, and then to be even more intentional with the money that we're earning. So that's one way that we can do that. There are some other things with kids that you can do to try to illustrate that, similar to the letting them buy an impulse purchase and then showing them the consequence that they then don't have money for something else. There is, as parents, you can issue IOUs if they don't have the money for something, and kind of make a mock debt situation and go, look, I'll buy that for you, but you have to pay that back to me. And because you're using my money, I'm going to charge you $5 extra for that. Are you willing to do that? And run them through that scenario and make them think about it. And for some kids, they're going to go, well, I don't want to do that. And for some kids, they're going to go, sure, let's do it. And they're going to have to learn the hard way that that's not a smart idea. But when we do that as parents, it's safe. We're taking care of them. We're training them. We're not going to let them go hungry. When they get into the real world as adults, though, if we've not trained them in how to make those decisions, they could go hungry. They could get themselves in messes. And so I want to teach my kids that when they borrow money, they're robbing from themselves. And third, I want to teach them how to save for future expenses and pay with cash. And so as a related part of all of that, I want to teach them the value of having real money. Now, we live in a world today, in a society today that has gone mostly digital. And I'm as guilty as the next person. I rarely have cash on me anymore because we've got plastic in our wallets that are directly connected to our bank accounts and all of that. And it's unnecessary for most things. But I still like with my children the concept of them handling actual cash, actual money, and having that in their hand and feeling it. And feeling it when they give it at church, feeling it when they share, feeling it when they spend. And I think that is something that as kids helps us to have that. If it's just swiped from the parent's card, they don't have much invested in that. But if they're saving their pennies, their quarters, their dollars, their whatever, and they physically take those and go to the store and spend it, it makes more of a difference. And it teaches them to be more intentional. So I want to use those types of strategies with my kids to teach them not to rob from themselves, but to save and prepare for those things. Number 5, I want to teach them that a penny saved is a penny earned. And what that phrase means essentially is that saving is essentially the same as earning. If you earn something, $100, and you spend it all, it's all gone. But if you earn $100 and you save $10, that $10 is adding to your wealth. It's adding to your assets. Then you go earn another $100 and you do the same thing. And essentially what you're doing is you're adding an amount of savings on top of what you're actually earning that will be considered assets or earnings that you can use later. So a penny saved is really a penny earned. It's a penny not spent. It's something that you will be able to use in the future. Proverbs chapter 13 and verse 11 says, wealth gained by dishonesty will be diminished, but he who gathers by labor will increase. And this talks about the idea of working hard consistently and diligently in order to increase what? Notice the two things that are paired in this verse. He says wealth, that's how he starts the verse. Wealth gained by dishonesty will go away. It'll be diminished. So if we're earning through a lack of integrity, dishonesty, we're robbing somebody, whatever the case may be, eventually that's gonna not work out for us. Okay, probably legally as well as financially. But wealth, when it is gathered by labor, will increase. Not just the income that you get from laboring, but the wealth. The amount that you actually have left over, the saving that you're able to do increases when you go work hard and diligently. And so wealth and the increasement of wealth is connected to this idea of work ethic that we've already talked about. In Proverbs chapter 21 and verse 20, it says, there is desirable treasure and oil in the dwelling of the wise, but a foolish man squanders it. And this draws the comparison between a wise and a foolish person. And that foolish person, he gets his income, he gets his earnings, and he squanders everything, and it's gone. And he has no oil, no treasures in his dwelling. He has no ability to pay for something if something unexpected happens. But the wise man, he saves some of what he earns, and he keeps treasure and valuable oil at his dwelling. In other words, with him, he is storing up valuables for a later time in which he will need it. That's what a wise person does. Matthew 25 and verse 27 says, "So you ought to have deposited my money with the bankers, and at my coming I would have received back mine own with interest." This is the 1-talent man in the story of the parable of the talents that Jesus tells. And if you recall, that 1-talent man who was given an amount of money to be a steward over, instead of going and making it work and increasing that amount of money for his Lord, went and hid it in the earth. And he was chastised and punished for that. And the instruction from Jesus is that 1-talent person should have gone and at the very least put it in the bank and earned some interest. That would have in that situation been considered a very conservative even approach, but at the very least it should have been invested to earn a little bit of more money. And so this idea of saving and investing is an important concept that I want my children to learn. So practical strategies that I need to model, how to prepare for emergencies and set savings goals for the expenses that we know will come. I want my kids to understand and know that because we don't want to rob our future selves and because we want to be good stewards with what we've been given, that we as parents have saved an amount of money to take care of any bad thing that may happen. So a good teaching opportunity for my kids is when something goes wrong at the house, when we have something break down, when there is all of a sudden a big purchase or we have to replace something. And then you don't have to talk through all of the financial details with the kids. That's not my point. But to let them understand that we're okay. God has blessed us. We're seeking to be good stewards. We've got money set aside for this. And so it's okay. We're not going to panic and react. And it's ruined our life because now we have to replace a water heater or whatever the case may be. When we manage those things well, I want to model that for them. That financial unexpected things don't have to be matters of stress that ruin our life in that moment. But that if we properly plan and prepare, that God gives us that ability to be at peace with those situations and go, okay, well, here we go. We've planned for that, and we can take care of it, and that's okay. And I want them to learn that we need to be prepared. And for savings goals as well, for the next car that we want to buy, for all of those, the big vacation we want to take, that I intentionally share with them and bring them into that process to go, look, y'all want to go on this vacation? Well, it's going to cost some money, so what we're doing is we're setting some money aside every month so we can go take that vacation so that they understand how those things work. I think about teaching them how to put money to work through investment and the power of compound growth. This is a little bit hard to teach a young one, but as they get older, there are a lot of great ways and strategies to begin to teach them this concept. I've recently started with Eli, teaching him some of these concepts as well, and we have opened him up a small account with his own money that he's been able to put in there, and I'm showing him the difference in some of the different ways that you can invest that money. And it's his money. It's obviously his parents' account, but it's his money that's in there, and we can check that periodically, not every day, because that's not what our life's about, and so we're teaching that as well. But every once in a while, we'll check it, we'll look at it, and we'll say, okay, hey, it's increased a little bit here, maybe it's decreased a little bit there, and to teach the basics of you put your money to work, and if you do it the right way, it grows over time. And so as your kids get older, I encourage you to use some of those things and strategies. But first, we have to do those things ourselves, and we have to understand the importance of saving and investing. And I also want them to learn the proper motivation for wealth building. It's not about greed. It's not about accumulation. It's not about materialism. That if we lost everything that we had tomorrow, we're still going to be the same people. It shouldn't change us. We're going to be the same people that trust in God, that live for Him, that seek to make decisions every day to honor and glorify Him, whether we have a lot or a little. That same principle is going to apply no matter what. And I want them to understand that saving and that investing is not about getting rich and then being able to live some lavish lifestyle of laziness and idleness. But it's about properly and diligently approaching our finances in a way that honors God as stewards, as managers of what He has given us, and receiving His blessing in return and being grateful for that. And then ultimately using those things in a good way with wise stewardship. So that leads me to the last point, the last thing that I want my children to learn about money, and that is that true wealth is not about what you have, but it's about what you share. And I want them to be able to integrate that into their heart. Luke chapter 12 and verse 15 says, he said to them, "Take heed and beware of covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of the things that he possesses." The scriptures are clear throughout, warning us not to put our faith or our trust in uncertain riches, not to love money, not to pursue riches, those who desire to be rich. If that is our end goal, that is what we're striving for and living for in life, we're going to be sorely disappointed. Because at the end of our life, whether that be tomorrow or 10 years from now or 40 years from now, guess what? All of that we have spent our life trusting in and working for is not even going to be ours to use anymore. We can't take it with us. It's going to be useless in eternity, and it will have only supported our own vanity while we are here and potentially destroyed and corrupted our spiritual life and our relationship with God. Not to mention, could get us into immense financial difficulty if we're unwise with those things, or if we trust in those things and then something does happen where they go away. And suddenly, our life is over because of money. It should never be. Money magnifies character. Money, and more money, allows you to really see who a person really is. But if we are the people of integrity that God has called us to be, good, faithful money managers, we would be the same person, whether we have a little or a lot. The same goals, the same desires to honor God, just a different capacity financially to carry those out. Proverbs chapter 3, verse 9 says, "Honor the Lord with your possessions and with the first fruits of all your increase." I want my kids to understand the importance of giving to God first and making him the priority, that giving and generosity is an extremely important concept. Paul said this in Acts 20 and verse 35, "I have shown you in every way by laboring like this that you must support the weak. And remember the words of the Lord Jesus, that he said, 'It is more blessed to give than to receive.'" I want my kids to grow up and understand that it is a far greater blessing to be able to share and give to others of, yes, their money, but also of their time and their talent and their energy and all of those things of their work. It is a much greater blessing to be able to give those things than to be on the receiving end of those things. It's wonderful to get a gift. It's great to know that somebody thought of you and got you something or whatever. That's all well and good. It's great when you're in dire straits. It's a wonderful blessing to have people that will be there to back you up and take care of you and give to you. And all of that is a very honorable thing. But it is much more blessed to be the giver than it is to be the receiver. And so sometimes we find ourselves in situations in life where we are the receiver and we need help, and that's okay. And help will be there, and family is there, and church is there, and all of that to try to support and help us through difficult times. But what we all should be striving towards is to get out of being the receiver of those things and be able to turn around at some point and become the giver. We need to have a heart of giving and generosity all along. True wealth is not about what you have, but about what you share. And so as I think about practical strategies that we need to model, I think about generosity through daily interactions with others. And what my kids see me do as I interact with people. Do they see kindness? Do they see a giving spirit that wants to be there for somebody, that wants to help? Even in situations, not even necessarily with money. But am I there when somebody needs it? To go help them with something, to take care of something that they can't do themselves? Am I willing to give of my time and my energy? And are my kids seeing that? Am I taking my kids with me in those situations of service and of help? To teach them the very practical aspects of what generosity and giving really means. You see, because truly as our resources grow and we have a greater financial capacity to help, it's a wonderful thing and we can be a great blessing financially. But what we have to be careful about is that we develop the mindset that says, well, I'll just write a check. Well, I'll just send some money. And that saves me from actually having to put work or effort in. We need to be people that work. That's what God has created us to do. People that give, people that love, people of compassion, people that are there for others. And so our finances are a wonderful part of that, but they're certainly not the whole thing. And I want my kids to see our money, our time, and our talents being used for those things. So proactive church services to the church, free will giving. I want them to be able to put money in the plate. As we talked about, the give give, save, spend concept. They've got a give jar that they're saving of their money, and I want them to be able to bring some of that on Sunday and put in the plate and feel that and understand the importance of giving. But not only that, but of volunteering, of visiting sick, of random acts of kindness, or not random acts in this case, but towards church members, of acts of kindness and love and compassion and all those things. If you believe that kids are a hindrance to those things, you're wrong. Now, there's some situations where it's not appropriate, obviously, to bring a child into the situation. I understand that. But where it is appropriate, we ought to be incorporating our kids, teaching them those real-life things. I want my kids to know and take to heart that it is more about giving to others and sharing with others than it is about having. That ultimately it is much better to give than to have. I want to teach them how to set a vision for their long-term generosity that can be shared with and passed to their children and their grandchildren. I want them, when they are adults and they are raising their own kids, to be able to remember back and say, I'm so thankful for mom and dad for teaching me these things so that now I can teach my own kids. I want to create a generational cycle of good decisions and of good stewardship, because how we manage money will affect our walk with Christ and our relationship with God dramatically. And when we do it the right way and we approach it the right way, there is a peace, and that worry and anxiety goes away, and that spirit of generosity and giving that is cultivated that makes the world a wonderful place and the church even better, a place where you have people that love and care about you, that are there for you, that want the best for you. And I want to create that in my children so that they remember those examples and those instructions, and then they pass that on to their kids. I want to see my grandkids handling their finances well, being good managers and stewards for God. I want to see my great-grandkids, if I live that long, doing the same thing. I want to create a generational cycle of good stewardship and break any cycles of poor stewardship that may exist. I want my kids to take that to heart, and I want to encourage you to help your kids to do the same. And as we close, Proverbs 13 and verse 22 says, a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children, but the wealth of the sinner is stored up for the righteous. That inheritance there can mean a lot of things. It's not just money. Money's included in that. But what kind of an inheritance, what kind of a legacy are you leaving for your children and for your family and future generations? Are you teaching them how to honor God as the owner of everything? How to control their money and not be controlled by it? How to not rob their future self, but instead save and invest diligently? Are you teaching them how to have a heart of generosity and a work ethic that's going to get up every day and go honor God by working hard? I hope my kids are learning that, and I hope yours are too. Leave the right kind of inheritance for your kids and bless their lives in the future by making intentional decisions with them today.
Thanks for joining our Sermon Series podcast today. For more, check us out on YouTube or come worship with us on Sunday mornings and Wednesday evenings.